guess, artist, Patrick Michael Karnahan, and I played with a group called the Black Irish Band. This podcast is going to be called The Ghost Songwriter. I was thinking lately with the passing of Gordon Lightfoot, who happened to be one of my greatest inspirations probably in my whole life. I got to hear Gordon Lightfoot in 1985, but it was probably in the mid-70s that his music had influenced my life. My parents got me into music at a very early age. I grew up first from Hawthorne, California, home of the Beach Boys, and then we moved to a little town north of Long Beach, and I grew up there. And then I moved to Northern California slowly from really, in my mind, age of 10, up to Jamestown. And I wasn't really much into the folk movement. It kind of passed me by. It had been decades before me with the Kingston Trio and all that had gone down, Dylan. But I was influenced by, first I think it was John Denver, and then later Gordon Lightfoot and Michael Martin Murphey, who I would later record with, exchange some music. So my influences of folk music was Gordon Lightfoot. That was my connection. I remember my sister had bought the LP Sundown, and I remember I just go, wow, what's this all about? I remember I'd been down at Huntington Beach out in the waves and got really sunburned, had been body surfing, and I come back and the sunburned, and she said, check out this folk singer, see what you think of it. So she put it on the old LP. That dates myself, right? So anyways, listen to Sundown. I go, man, this is marvelous. What is all this about? Because at that point, I'd been a brass player. I mean, I played the trumpet since I was a little kid and a little bit dabbled with the French horn. But I go, wow, this folk music is kind of neat. So I kind of was really enjoying it, which would later influence my songwriting. How much it influenced me? Well, the title of my podcast is basically Ghost Songwriter. And the reason I use that term is because I realized that reflecting over the hundreds of songs I've written, most of them about people, places, histories, just the fact of history, they're gone. They're no longer here. Some of them are well known, some not as much. Some had a great legacy, certain characters, history. Others, they were heroes, they were of their time, and then they disappeared. Just like the forgotten graves you see in some of these old Wild West cemeteries where the headstones are so blasted away, like who is buried there? You don't know. And I realized that in my songs, as Gordon Lightfoot had said in a recent interview, that my music is a little different because they're not all about reflective love songs. Boy meets girl, girl meets boy, boy gets dog, gets a pickup. Like modern country western, like so much of hip hop and rock is all based on relationships. Where like Gordon Lightfoot and myself, as he was stating, that writes story songs. One of his great classics is one of his few #1 hits, Record of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Another one he wrote for the Canadian government, Canadian Railroad Trilogy. Both influenced me greatly when I was growing up. Got me out of listening to the brass music. I mean, I was into Tower of Power, Maynard Ferguson, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Chicago. I mean, as a trumpet player, of course, Herb Alpert kind of led us on. But when I heard that Sundown album by Gordon Lightfoot, it changed me. And little did I know, but it would affect my songwriting. So the podcast, again, is Songwriter, or Ghost, the Ghost Songwriter, for good reasons. Let's talk a little bit more about the music itself. The Black Irish Band, the group that I helped form with my best friend, Richard Restivo, who passed on in, unfortunately, April 2017. I had known Richard prior to that. We both played horn together, trumpet, and we had done a few jobs. And then we were cast in this film called Back to the Future 3 with Michael J. Fox. And we were on the set for 3 nights in a row, long, cold nights. And we had a lot of downtime. We were in the Hill Valley Band, and they had me walk around as an extra on the film set. I did a lot of that. And Steve MacArthur, who would be our future bandmate, was actually casted in a speaking role with Michael J. Fox. He actually threw down the gun at the bar and said, "Here," and said, "Gee, Mr. Eastwood, you sure had the gumption to stand up." I better not repeat it because there's probably copyright infringement there on Steve's royalties, and I wouldn't want to take that away from Steve. But anyways, that's kind of how the band first got together. Me and Rick were in those long night scenes, and there's a lot of dead time on a movie production. It's different than being on TV. TV is short. Usually they take it 1, 2 takes, it's gone. But that night scene where they were dancing, the clock tower scene, it went on 3 nights in a row. A lot of walking back and forth, holding up the instrument kind of thing. So me and Rick, while we were sitting there at 3 in the morning, said, "Hey, Patrick, I know we both play music together. And, I heard that you had gone to Ireland and were living there for a while." And it's true. I was over there teaching art to senior citizens over in Mayo. And he said, "I heard you played a little banjo and you're kind of into your Irish roots and Scottish roots." I said, "Oh, yeah, Rick, yeah." He said, "Well, believe it or not, besides being a trumpet player, I play the stand-up bass." For me, it was a big deal in college because, the trumpet is very limiting. You can't sing and play a horn or a sax or something. So we kind of got into the old stand-up bass. So we got to talking and said, "Well, maybe we should get together and, get a band together." And I said, "Great idea." So unfortunately, it was October 1989, and the night of the first band practice, believe it or not, was the Loma Prieta earthquake. Now, we were at the classroom at Sonora Elementary School where Richard Restivo was teaching at the time, and one of his students had come in and said, "Mr. Restivo, there's been a great earthquake in the Bay Area during the World Series. Oh my God." So we turned on the TV in the classroom. Wow, believe it or not, that was the first band practice of Black Irish. We had just decided on the name Black Irish Band. And the rest, of course, is history. That was the fall of 1989. The reason we picked Black Irish Band, it was my idea, is because I just thought it was a very eclectic name. Just Irish this or Irish that, or him being Sicilian, Italian. I like Black Irish because it just sounded different. Who knows really what it means? Historian says it has a lot to do with the Spanish Armada, staying in Irish ports. Rick would swear it had to do by the intermarriages of the Catholic, Sicilian, and Irish in New York and some of the bigger cities, because they're both being Catholic, and they're called the Black Irish. Who knows? But does it really matter? I think the big important take is it's eclectic, and that's exactly what the Black Irish Band has been. We've released a total of 27 albums, and we've recorded well over 100 original songs. Most of those I've written. Rick wrote a few, and Steve, of course, MacArthur wrote a few. So anyways, the concept of the Black Irish Band started on the film set, the discussion. Then we go to the classroom, the earthquake, Black Irish Band is formed. And then it comes to what are we going to perform? There's a lot of traditional material out there. Probably my big influencers at that particular time, as said earlier, Gordon Lightfoot, of course, when I was growing up, was probably the Clancy Brothers, the Dubliners. When I was living in Ireland, about 25 years old, I was over a little town called Westport. I remember that one of the members of the Chieftains had just bought in a pub there, and they were celebrating, and the Chieftains were playing on the rooftop. There I was again with my trumpet. I'm not going to be sitting in with anybody there. But I did sit in some Dixieland sessions at the Westport House, and I did run into a songwriter, singer, an Irish lad. He's probably 17 years old. Great ideas. And he says, "Patrick, you got the horn." He says, "Hey, let's get together and form a band. Let's do a band." I go, "What am I going to do? I got this little trumpet." I had a pocket trumpet at the time. He had a guitar. I said, "What are we going to do?" "I don't know, but let's form a band." And I said, "Okay, I'm game for it." So I think his name's Chris Cohen. And I don't know where he is today. He grew up in County Mayo, Westport. If you're out there, Chris, I love you, man. And you actually, Chris, were the one that got me into writing songs, because it was with Chris that I started writing songs for the very first time. Believe it or not, on the trumpet. Trumpet is not the most ideal instrument to write music on. But anyways, Chris says, "Hey, man, let's get together, man." I said, "Well, I know a couple jazz tunes. I guess you can play the guitar, of course. I'll play horn." He says, "I know this really great girl. It's cool. She plays the keyboard. She can do the bass line. And I got a guy who plays the bongos." I go, "Oh, this is going to be great, right?" I said, okay, well, let's get some practice. Practice? He goes, shit, we got a gig already booked this Friday. And it's a Monday. And I go like, we don't have any material. He says, well, we can come up with stuff. I said, okay. So, I don't know, it came to me and I started writing songs, instrumentals. And I wish to God I still had copies of those first songs. I probably wrote about 10 of them on the trumpet. And I said, here's how it goes. And then I said, that's a good chord. That's a good chord. Now, mind you, I wasn't really into the guitar or string instruments at that particular moment in my life. I was still pretty much a brass player, trumpet, French horn. So there I wrote the songs. I don't know where they went to. We did have the performance in 1 week's time. It was a 2-hour session at a pub in Westport, Ireland, and I can guarantee you it probably wasn't the best, but you know, all the parents of the kids were there. I was 25, Chris was probably 17, 18. I think the 2 other members of the band were probably 16 or 17. So their parents came down, everybody supported us in the pub. It was kind of cool. So that was actually my first paid gig in my life, actually, other than what I did in college, maybe at high school. And it was in Westport, Ireland. And I wrote a group of songs on the trumpet. Okay. So now fast forward 2 years. Now the Black Irish Band, the roots of Black Irish Band are forming. Rick had performed a few times with me on the horn, and then we had this discussion Back to the Future 3. Well, it was third trip to Ireland, where I wasn't working there, where I just kind of toured around the country. I ended up down in Wexford. There's a County Wexford Museum there. It's kind of a castle. And I remember it was a cold, cloudy day, and there were some thunder cells coming in off the Irish Sea. And I was up on the second floor, and there were these mass figurines from the front of the ship, the bow of the ship. Amazing, these masks, you know. And there was this woman, and he said the Pomona. And she had a bushel of corn here in one hand, I remember, and then her other hand was in a bag of grain reaching forward. And I thought, well, that's an interesting story. Pomona, of course, I thought, well, that's an Indian name. Of course, I remember Pomona, California, you know, and all that. So I read the story, and what was interesting is as I would read further along, now mind you, second floor of an old castle in Wexford on a very cloudy, stormy day. And in that castle, they had some higher up glass windows that they filled in with glass, of course. And lightning started to hit. And I remember a bolt of lightning coming through across, and it went right across this figurine from the ship, this beautiful Indian maiden named the Pomona. And the lightning bolt came right across where her eyes would have been and kind of lit up it just for a second. You can't make this stuff up, folks. Maybe that's where the ghost songwriter comes in. And I remember I was just mystified by the whole experience. And then I read this story, this tragic story of these immigrants. The Pomona was a clipper ship. It was built in Boston. It was designed for the immigration trade. And unfortunately, on the maiden voyage, leaving Ireland with all these immigrants, she floundered off the Irish Sea, not too far from Wexford, Ireland, a place called Blackwater. And there were 400 of these passengers that died. And it was in very shallow water. Short story is Liverpool was a major jumping off point for immigrants coming to the New World. That was pretty much where you'd get your 747 or your jet to go anywhere in the entire world. It was that hub. But back then, the clipper ship was designed by the Americans, a very fast form of transportation. And these immigrants, of course, came over across the Irish Sea on some type of ship to get to Liverpool, and they would pool their money together and then book passage. Unfortunately, the ship floundered. The captain was in a heavy squall and was operating off the wrong navigational chart, and what thought was a lighthouse off England was actually Wexford, and ran aground. The ship sunk in about an hour. And most of the passengers are dead. There were a few survivors. Of course, a lot of the crew survived. And it wouldn't be till weeks later that all the bodies would slowly wash up to shore. So anyways, I'm reading this account. And what struck me is that it said that when the deep divers went down into the ship, there were these passengers, and they could see them. They were holding hands because these now are corpses, ghosts. And they said they all pretty much died with dignity, that they were all knew their fate, and they were there. And they said that the hatch had been locked. Now, there's some controversy. Did the crew actually do that? Lock them in there, kind of on the story on the Titanic, where they didn't want them out? Or could it be they just didn't want them to bother the crew when they're in such a tragic situation, when they're trying to do things on ship? Can't have all these people running around. We'll never know the story. But there's the song. So I had that in my head. Now, at the point of time, I did not play the guitar. I played a second-hand octave mandolin, known as a Greek instrument called the bouzouki. Pretty simple to play. You know, it's like more like a ukulele or, you know, something like that. So anyways, I had that in hand, and I kept thinking of that story. And as I got into my car, I'm driving now over to the west of Ireland. And these ghosts I call them ghosts or spirits, prodded me so hard that I stopped. It was right around sunset. And I went on top of this hill. I think it was in Tipperary. And there was a song. Where did it come from? I don't know. Some of these songs, they come from somewhere. They're not necessarily from me, but there's a channel that takes place. I'm not really into that stuff. I'm a good old Irish Catholic boy, but there is something to be said here, because in this podcast, there'll be a lot of these experiences where I'll tell you where those songs came from, because sometimes I don't know, but there they are. So the voices reach out to me, and then I wrote the song. And we'll do a podcast on that particular song, and it's called The Wreck of the Pomona, which is probably the first ballad I wrote. And I do believe I wrote that, I want to say it was about 1987, somewhere around there. And I was in Ireland when I wrote it. And then from there on, there would come the songs. Now, The Wreck of the Pomona is actually featured on the Black Irish Band, the very first album that I produced and wrote for the band. And the album was called The Forgotten Fields of America. And there's a lot to be said about the ghosts in that title itself. These are stories from America that a lot of people would have never known about. So when you write stories about ghosts, or the ghosts give you the story, there's a lot to be said. As a songwriter, sometimes you only have 3 to 4 minutes to put a song together. You got a chorus, you got a verse. Sometimes you might have a bridge if it fits in. And chords are important. They're very poignant. Every chord, every word, you have to tell a complete story in a short period of time. And so it's important that when you get this channel from beyond, that you know how to put it together. And of course, when you write a song, like when Gordon Lightfoot, for instance, wrote The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, there were a few things that he got wrong, and he realized it later. He wouldn't have known that till after they dived on the wreck and they found out certain things didn't take place exactly the way he put it. But at the time, that's all the information he had. I can retrospect that with a song I wrote called The Wreck of the Brother Jonathan. A short story here. The Brother Jonathan set sail in the 1860s from San Francisco Harbor. It was loaded down with gold, passengers going up to, I think, Portland, up to Vancouver. They basically were providing a lot of provisions for some of the forts in northwestern America. And unfortunately, bad storm off the Farallon Islands, trying to get up to Crescent City. She ran aground on what Seal Rock, now called Jonathan Rock, and great loss of life. Few survivors to tell the story. At the time, the Brother Jonathan ship had never been located. So in the lyrics, I clearly said, someday a ghost will rise up to give her away. Because at the time I wrote the song was before deep sea rescue found and located the boilers and the ship, and then of course the gold. So as a songwriter, sometimes we don't have all the information till maybe years later. Same with Gordon Lightfoot. So then he changed some of the words later on that particular song. Same with me and the Brother Jonathan. I've had to change the words a little bit. Normally I don't like doing that, but in the case of a ship that was lost, a ghost ship that all of a sudden is found, it's like okay, cat's out of the bag. We know it's been found now. So why is he saying a ghost will rise up and give her away? Because the ship's already been found. That happens. Not that often. So anyways, getting back to the podcast, I call this the, ghost songwriter. I guess I'll be the ghost songwriter. Because I feel like I'm speaking for, like these pictures behind me. It tells a lot of stories. It's my family. Over here, I have my dad's B-24. And boy, there's a whole story behind that plane, I'll tell you. And it's buried somewhere over in England. I visited the site of that. And I got my mom over here, my family. Just like you have all your family, you probably have pictures on the wall. You wonder, you look at those old pictures. Like I have some pictures of my dad's folks were Scots-Irish. In Kansas, I see during the thrashing years, they got the steam tractor, all of them on the farm. They all had big families. What were their stories? You go to these museums, you look into their eyes. What were they doing? What was so important in their moment, their life? Because we all had that life. And we were all living it at that moment. That photograph was taken. And there's so much to be said. And it's like they're crying out. They have something to say. Like those passengers, immigrants on the Pomona, down there off the Irish Sea. There they were, trying to get to America. They had lives. They had stories. But they're gone. Finally, they created a memorial to them, a monument there off Blackwater in Wexford. So if you get a chance, try to go see that. Or you look like a song like Spancel Hill, which is a traditional song. I've been doing Spancel Hill for so many years because that was one of the first songs I learned when I was living in Ireland. It got me into folk music, Irish folk music, really, was Spancel Hill. And then you finally travel. We just toured Ireland this last summer with the Black Irish Band. I actually went to the location where the song was written. I went to the church at Clooney, and I tried to look for Michael Constantine's family, the songwriter. There's so much there, in these songs. And don't get me wrong, I like love songs. I've written a few of them, but let's face it, the world is full of love songs. We have a lot of them, Paul McCartney, And that's fine, but I think, as Gordon Lightfoot said, it's good to tell stories of others and histories. But you got to try to get it right. You have to make sure as a songwriter, you try to be poignant, try to be right, try not to be too political. You don't want to get the facts wrong because you are changing history when you write these songs, just like the Wild West. You take a look at a movie like Tombstone, for instance, all the different revisions of movies up to the time of Tombstone, which was pretty good, but some things, of course, conjecture, not necessarily. Or look at Braveheart. You look at that story, great story, great movie, but, a lot of things are made up along the way, the princess, and not all of them are accurate. And then people who don't take time to research will go on believing verbatim that's the way William Wallace was, or that's the way Doc Holliday or, White Earp was. But, these songs, I don't want to get it wrong. Some of these subjects are very touchy. I wrote a song called Last Flight of 123. It's a more contemporary song. It deals with a pilot and a co-pilot who died tragically in 2002 when their firebomber crashed on a fire. And you got to be careful because, these people, they have family, they're still alive. So you have to be careful, how you present a song. Like Gordon Lightfoot, he got some criticism for the Edmund Fitzgerald because some of the family members weren't happy because there were just certain things that were said in that song. So you got to be careful. You take a lot of risks as a songwriter when you write story songs, especially songs of historical nature. One of the first earlier songs I wrote to Captain Jack, the Modoc War. This is a story, very sensitive subject. It has to do with America called the Indian Wars, in which Captain Jack was the leader, Kintwash, which is Modoc name, was elected the leader of the Modoc people, basically to lead them off a reservation up in Oregon back to their ancestral homeland. Well, of course, that didn't sit well with the government, and the government tried to negotiate them to leave back to reservation. Things broke down, a U.S. general was killed, a skirmish took place, soldiers were killed, Captain Jack was brought to trial and hung. Very sensitive topic, very tragic topic in American history, which we'll address in one of these podcasts. And when all possible, too, I'll also include historical photographs. I might even include a link to the music video, because a lot of these songs, we do have music videos to go along with it. But as a songwriter, these things are important to try to be accurate. I mean, if you're going to channel the dead, you know, the ghosts, as I prefer to call them, try to get it right, or at least in your heart, what you feel is right. You know, so that's where we're going with this. Hopefully some of you will find it fascinating, interesting. This is just the introduction. I don't know how regularly I'll be doing this. I will number them so it'll make it easier, and I will post the subject of what song we are talking about. For musicians, we'll probably go over some of the chord structure, melody, might even talk about the technical information of how we recorded the song, but more importantly, what inspired the song. Being the ghost songwriter, I want you to know where I got it, how it got channeled to me. Why did I write that song? How important is that song? Because like I said, I think we all have something important to say. And then looking at these photographs up there, what did they say? What did your ancestors say? Look at those pictures. Look at those eyes. What were they thinking when that picture was taken? And here's food for thought. Chances are 105 years from now, you're going to be one of those people just like me. I'll be up on that wall and say, who was that guy with the guitar? Or out in the digital world, out there in the cloud, they'll be watching a video. You know, like, wow, man, that guy's been gone for a long time, you know? So why do we do it? I do it just because I have to. It's just something, it's in me. I didn't necessarily ask for it. It just came to me. So then I do it. And I hope that you enjoy this musical journey. I'll try to get something out every 2 weeks. I think that's realistic. The band's very, very busy at the moment. We have a lot going on. We have a new website. We have several concerts. We have a lot more new material to cover. Coming up here on the May 20th, we'll be at Piper's Opera Hall in Virginia City, Nevada, which we're excited. I will try to get some video cameras out and do a multiple shoot so we have something to post. And this will be mostly newer material. There's been a great changeover in the band personnel in the last couple of years. But I think things are going really well with the band. I've written a lot of new original songs, and I'm excited about the future. So hopefully you'll stay tuned to the Ghost Songwriter, and we'll just call this the introduction. So I guess in actuality, this isn't actually the podcast. We'll just call it the introduction to the Ghost Songwriter. Again, my name is Patrick Michael Karnahan. I'm a member of the Black Irish Band. Say if you like it, got a comment out there. We'll try to get something going here pretty soon. We'll probably start with some of the earlier songs and work our way forward on this journey. So I'm broadcasting right now live from Shelter Cove, California, which is located in the very southern end of Humboldt County. I'm right on the ocean. I'm looking at the wild Pacific Ocean here off my left eye, and I'm looking at you with my right eye. So anyways, I hope that you join me on this journey, and we'll explore interesting subjects, stories of these songs that I've been able to channel, to write over the years. So without further ado, top of the day to you, and to all you folks around the world, whatever day or night it is, we hope to see you down the road. See you later.